Hello, Vol Vault members, to celebrate 22 days until Tennessee football. I have number 22 VFL Floyd Miley. How are you doing, Floyd?
I am doing wonderful. How are you doing?
I cannot complain. So,
Hey,
all right. So, we have lots of games and plays that we can talk about from your career here at Tennessee. But I think, first of all, um, we need to probably talk about the miracle at South Bend. So I think everybody remembers that one. Even if you weren't old enough to remember it, you still have heard about it enough to know. So, highly anticipated game. Tennessee was number 13, Notre Dame number 5. We dug a huge hole in the first quarter, right? And then they had Jerome Bettis, and he was running all over us and all that stuff. And then we were at risk of going into halftime down 31-7, but then you and one of your teammates had a pretty big play. Do you want to talk about that game just a little bit, like how it all went down from your perspective?
okay, yeah. But before I do that, let me put the game into perspective.
Okay.
Okay. In 1990, Notre Dame came and they were ranked number one. They came to Neyland Stadium, and they were actually underdogs to win the game. We were favored to win.
Mm-hmm.
We lost that game, and I missed two tackles in that game. One against Ricky Waters, and I still think about that play every day. But what ended up happening is that I was benched for the remainder of the season. I lost my starting job because of that game. So
Mm-hmm.
then when you circle back a whole year, I had to build myself up from the second, third team back to the starting position. And luckily I was able to do that. So the Notre Dame game to me was personal going into it already.
Okay.
So we all hyped up and everybody saying, okay, we got a chance to beat them because we know we should beat them last year. And plus we were returning most of our starters on offense and defense and special team. So, and then they lost a few. They lost Ricky Waters. They also lost Ishmael.
Mm-hmm.
So we had felt as though we had a big opportunity to win. However, Jerome Bettis was, as you said, he was a constant thrown in our sides or whatever. So going into halftime, we always knew that there are some sensitive spots on their kicking offensive line, and we were going to take advantage of it. So we called it. We had nothing else to lose at that particular point in time because if they would have made that field goal, the game probably would have been over.
Mm-hmm.
So Coach Lacewell called for the block kick. Daryl Harder sliced through the line as he always do, blocked the kick. The ball ended up on between one of their offensive linemen's legs. Somehow or another, I was the only one to see it. So then I scooped down, I picked it up, and I just started running. And I'm just running. Chuck Smith telling, pitch me the ball, pitch me the ball. Daryl Harder asked me, pitch me the ball. And I just kept running. And I'm just running. All of a sudden, I get to the end zone. And I'm like, okay, touchdown. This is good. But then I looked up at the scoreboard and it was 31-14, still an improbable comeback. But
Mm-hmm.
what that play did, it gave us momentum. And when we went into the locker room, Coach Majors wrote 31-14 on the board. Half of their their points came from turnovers. So he said, if you take away the turnovers, we were actually beating Notre Dame in the actual game. We were calm about it. So we just came around and somehow or another we just rallied around each other and decided we're not going to lose this particular ball game. And we just fought back and we climbed, and it even got down to the last second of the game. And again, they're lining up for a field goal. This one is to just really squash our hopes or whatever. And Jeremy Lincoln actually outran the football when he was on the kick, and it ended up hitting him in his butt. We won the game. And it was like ecstatic. Okay, we was happy. The fans came on the field. We just enjoyed ourselves as though we won the SEC championship. But the impact that play made, I never conceptualized until years later.
Mm-hmm. So John Ward had a pretty famous line. He said, "Floyd Miley can fly." So, and you actually wrote a book titled that, right?
Actually, that was I mean, you could not think of a better title than that. I mean, what
Right.
John Ward gave me, he forever linked me and him to the University of Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
And so when everybody talks about it, they hear about Notre Dame guy, the game, the first thing they said, Floyd Miley can fly. And
Right.
so it's like if I'm gonna write a book about my college career, it has to be Floyd Miley can fly. So it's a book about my trials and tribulations, both on the field and off the field,
Mm-hmm.
coming from a 17, 18-year-old not even knowing how the world really works. And then all of a sudden I'm being thrown into this gauntlet called college football and not having awareness of it. So, but I was able to learn a lot. So that's why I decided to go ahead and put it back, put that book down, put it out rather, and just give future generations of Vol fans or football fans or just people in general, just an idea of some of the struggles that we go through on a day-to-day, year-to-year basis. Because a lot of times, the only time y'all hear from us is when we're doing extremely good or extremely bad. But
Right.
y'all not to the day in and day and out. The times when you want to quit, the times when you're just so mad at your coach you could just choke them. All those things, never really come to play in the fans' eyes. But I want to give them an open perspective of it.
Mm-hmm. I'll definitely have to check that book out. So you have a rare distinction in the record books at Tennessee. We talked about the returned block field goal at Notre Dame in 1990 against Ole Miss. You returned a blocked extra point for a touchdown, and which I think you're the only player in Tennessee history to do that. But also, you returned a blocked punt for a touchdown too. Is that right?
No, it was just a block field goal against Mississippi.
Okay.
And then the Miracle at South Bend play.
Yeah.
And then if you understand the Memphis, when we were in Memphis against Ole Miss, that was in 1990. That was immediately about a week or two after the Notre Dame loss. I wasn't expected to play. And actually, if you go back and look through the tape, I did not step on the field the entire game until they went for the field goal. They said, Floyd Miley, go in. I hadn't stretched, hadn't done anything. So I'm going in. I'm just going to stand up here and see. I didn't know that Ryan Patterson was going to block the kick and I was going to pick it up and just start back running. So it was like, okay. So I'm saying, okay, good. I've done something positive to recover from my mistake. So now I just feel a little better about, me getting my starting position back. But unfortunately, it didn't happen. And I am currently the only player in college football history that returned a block kick and a block field goal within the same 12 calendar months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, that is phenomenal. So you played for Johnny Majors, obviously. And so I was 11 when Coach Fulmer took over. So I've read everything I can about Johnny Majors and I've watched different stuff that's came out. But what has stuck with you over the years about Coach Majors? I know you can't sum up in one sentence, but what's the most, if you could say anything about Coach Majors, what would it be?
Actually, I can actually do that because when my first dealings with Coach Majors, for those fans that were back around that time, as well as some of the former players knew that we had a contentious relationship. Actually, I think it was a dislike relationship, at least coming from my perspective. But that was because I was young and didn't know exactly what was going on. So throughout those years, I was trying to be a man instead of working within the system in order to accomplish what I need to accomplish. So this happened also right around the time in 1990 when Coach Majors, I had got into an altercation with Doug Matthews, who was the defensive coach for the 1989 season going to the 89 Sugar Bowl. Okay, so before we played LSU that year, I was not allowed to go to the game. So I'm like, okay, so I'm definitely in the doghouse. Once they're not going to travel with you, you're definitely in the doghouse. And so I took the time off after the Cotton Bowl to go back to Florida, and I thought about my life, Tennessee, as well as football, and what role am I really going to play at the university? Not knowing what their thoughts are, but this is just coming from an internal perspective with me. So when I got back on campus that January, first thing I walked into, I got a meeting with Coach Majors. Got a letter in my mailbox. You have a meeting with Coach Majors, blah, blah, blah in the morning. I said, okay. All right, so here it comes. But see, I'd already made up my mind that I wanted to stay at Tennessee and I was going to do whatever I needed to do in order to become a better player, become a better student athlete. So we sat down and we had a meeting and Coach Majors basically gave me the riot act. He said, we've been wasting our time with you for the past 2-3 years. You're struggling in school, you're struggling on the field, you're struggling with the teammates. It's just a whole bunch of chaos. And they said, if you don't step it up, we're going to have to let you go. Basically, that's what it is. Or we're going to move on without you. And I told Coach Majors, I said, if everything that we've been through, if that slate is clean, then you're looking at your starting cornerback for the 1990 season. And now I was like, oh, I said it, but I didn't really think about what I was actually saying. Because you still, I mean, somebody could say, listen, you have a clean slate, but there's certain things that you have to do in order to keep that slate clean. But I wasn't thinking about that. So I decided I'm going to bust my butt. I'm going to do whatever I need to do in order to start getting the starting position. And I actually was able to do it. Coming out of spring game, that's when I was named the Andy Spiver Most Improved Player. So going to fall camp, I knew that I was going to be a starter with the position. When camp started, I was number 2. And this was when we was getting ready to go play Colorado in the Pigskin Classic out in California. So I had about 2 weeks to return to take my position from J.J. McCleskey. And that's a formidable task because that is one talented, awesome, player. That's my brother, very awesome. But when on the field, it's a different story. So we're going back and forth. We're battling the whole time. Somehow or another, I ended up being I was announced the starting defensive back. So I was like, okay, everything is fine. So, and then as I progressed in life, I started, you reflect back on some of your past experiences with people because I did hold a grudge for Coach Majors for a long time. But then I thought about it and I realized as I got older what he was trying to teach me. Okay. And what he was trying to teach me is that if you don't have the discipline to do what you need to do, how can we trust you to do what you want to do? Mm-hmm. So what he was doing, and he used to call it, and the way he rephrased it, it was almost like he was going to break you down and then build you up, not change your personality to who you are, just giving you that strength, that perseverance, that to overcome any type of obstacle there. So when I realized that, and I realized that large part of my career was my mistake, things in which I did, or at least I took ownership for it. And I saw Coach Majors in a totally different light. And the 2 or 3 years that I saw him before he passed, we always had that conversation. Floyd Miley, he knew exactly where I was, who I was, what play I made, where I was from. Even, he getting close to the end. And we just had, at that point in time, I just adored him, because he was very influential in my life. But he was very hard, but he was fair.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's about all you can ask for. Floyd, how do you think that the game has changed from when you played until now?
Man, the game is so soft right now. I'm gonna tell you what I actually saw today. I was watching some of the practice drills, and they had the shoulder pads and helmets on. And then the guy was pulling his dummy. He was holding his dummy, and the defensive back was supposed to go and just grab the dummy and then flip on this bag that they had waiting there. I'm like, wait, hold on now. You got this big old bag that's gonna protect you from hitting the ground. How's that football? It's not going to be there. And I understand you have to keep your players, healthy and going to the season. But when we played, man, when I first went to school, we went to spring practice. There was 20 days of full pads, hard hitting every day, until they reduced it to 15 days. And then you have to give us some pad day. Even during the 2-day season, we were always going against full, because how could you learn to tackle a dummy if you can't tackle a man? Okay, what I'm trying to say is that they're trying to tackle a dummy, but a dummy does not teach you how to tackle a player that's moving. I understand they're working on the technique, but to me, it just seems like it was a waste of time. Back in the day, we had one-on-one drills, receiver go against the defensive back, whether it's routes, whether they're running routes for the offense, or whether we're doing blocking, and there's things of that. So it's getting very aggressive. Nowadays, the game is a little sensitive. It's a little weak. You can't do a lot of things. You can't hit people, because one thing I was talking with someone about is that, how you go across the middle, and when you run that crossing route across the middle, and you're that safety or that cornerback that's supposed to come, your job is to decapitate that receiver. You can't do that nowadays. It's just so sad. So, but the game, to me, is losing a lot of it, and I've started to compare it to, okay, if you remember the NWA, the National Wrestling Alliance, and the WWE, there was a transformation that went from athletes that were really committed to now just being a show for entertainment. And that's why I see a large part of college football. There's no hard hitting, there's no grinding. Players get opportunity to transfer. if they're not happy. Oh, they ain't paid me, so I can go ahead and leave. That to me, it messes up the integrity of the game.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely different, and it's a money game. So whatever's most entertaining, I suppose. So Floyd, what are you into these days? I noticed you've got Legends of Tennessee camp T-shirt on. So was that held recently?
Actually, yeah, this one was held. We did a what Chris Treese and Jabbar Davis, who are both VFLs. They
Mm-hmm.
have this Legends camp in which they travel across the state of Tennessee, and they offering camps to anyone from 8 years old up until 18 years old. And when they just teach them the finer skills on the skills on being a better player, but also what they talk about having the right mentality in order to be a college athlete. Because the first one day it's a camp, but then they have a symposium where the audience or the athletes can ask us questions about our different lessons that we learn in college. So it's very well rounded, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and they do a great job of doing that. So if anybody out here have any fans, football players that's coming up, that's teenagers or younger than teenagers, I encourage them highly to look at it, Tennessee Legends football camp, and I guarantee you they will get something out of it. Another good thing which that camp does is that it keeps a connectivity between the old players and the new players. Because in this previous camp, I think last year was when I met Joe Milton.
Mm-hmm.
And just got able to be around him and to listen to him and see how big and how awesome that guy really is. So it does a lot for Tennessee football. And then I think that everyone should support him, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Now you have a podcast out right now, which I listened to the other day, and you said something. I guess the main subject of one of the episodes was you said everybody has a brand, whether you realize it or not. And I really liked that. What do you mean by that?
Okay. From the day we're born, okay, our name is a brand, okay? And how we act and how we carry ourselves is also inclusive of that type brand. So some people work better on their brand, means getting up, doing what you're supposed to do. They want to have a positive brand, and some people have a negative brand. So everybody has one, but they have to need to recognize that. Because like this, if you send a resume out to a potential job employer, that resume is your brand. It tells what you are, who you are, what you've done, and what experiences you bring to the table. Now, if that brand, when they have the interview, if the way you act don't match that resume, you're not going to get the job.
Mm-hmm.
So people need to pay attention about their brand, especially in this day and age of social media. You know, you can do one thing that'll slip up and cost you your brand, get you canceled off networks and doing all this other crazy stuff. So everybody has a brand. But as I said in the, you know, I got the inspiration to do that quote from Jay-Z when he said, "You're supposed to think like a business because you are a business." And people don't join a podcast because you're able to pull in some of the old VFLs. People listen to this podcast is because you're relatable. Your brand is already out there. So as long as we got something and we hold true to it, everything else will grow.
Well, yeah, well, I loved that. Let's transition over to this current team. How do you think? No, you know, it's much different from when you played. I mean, Tennessee football was the end all be all when you played. And then we went through all these, you know, dark years. And then, you know, we're on an upward trend now. So how do you view this program? Do you think that this success is sustainable? Or did we catch lightning in a bottle last year? Or how do you feel about all that?
Well, if you look at the first year Hypo came in, he made some good points. He saw that we possibly could be heading in the right directions. But then if you look at what was going on the second year, if you look at the games, his offense and his defense, they kept improving. Now they did have some lackluster games the year before, but they wasn't able to win the game that they are supposed to win. This year, they put it together. They not only won the games that they were supposed to win, they upset a few that they weren't supposed to win. So as long as you have that, you have a coach with a creative mind. He's an offensive genius, and you have players that he can recruit those players, and that he also can develop those players. Then what you have there, you have a path, you have a sustainability that would take you deep into the future. Because look at the offense now. If you're a wide receiver or quarterback anywhere in high school, the place that you really want to go to is the University of Tennessee. Why? Because they throw the ball so much and the offense is unstoppable. Look at what Hendon Hooker was able to do with his career. Coming from I think, was he the one that came from Virginia Tech or
Virginia Tech? Yes.
Right. So, and then he had success at Virginia Tech, but then he came here, he bought into Heupel's system, learned from Heupel, and then look at the man now where he was able to go. You don't know what would have happened had he not torn his ACL. But then you also got to take a look at how Joe Milton responded. Okay, we talk about adversity. We talk about when I was benched in 1990, I had to fight my way back to the top or back on the starting position. Joe Milton had that similar experience. The only difference between me and Joe Milton is I didn't have luxury of social media.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't hear all the fans talking bad about me and saying all these things. But I read a quote from him the other day. He said, when I get my chance, I'm going to go hard. It wasn't if I get my chance, it's a matter of when, because he knew he was going to get his chance. Now, in this day in college football, he could have opted out and transferred and went to another school. Okay, his arm is good enough, somebody would have picked him up. But because of his chemical makeup, he decided that he's going to stay here the way he is. He's going to improve, and he's going to go hard this year. Look at what he was able to do the times he played during this past season. Look at what he did in a Orange Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And if I have a quarterback that been through that type of adversity and still remains faithful and committed to the program, yes, that's sustainability. Because that means Heupel and his coaching staff is doing something right.
Right. So I heard the other day a player, and it's a current player, but he didn't commit to us out of high school. He said, I didn't even think about Tennessee. I didn't give him a thought. Well, then he goes to another school, and all of a sudden, he's thinking about Tennessee. It seems like we're in everybody's top 5 now. Like all the top players in the country, they have Tennessee in their top 5. So what do you think? Is it just this success, or do you think that it's that they see all the other stuff that comes in, the fan base, the facilities? I mean, is it just like the instant gratification of our offense, or do you think that they think they can really be developed here? Or what do you think is the pull for so many players now to Tennessee?
I think it's all of it. It's all the things you mentioned. Before in order to have a great recruiting year, you must first have the facilities that's going to impress. And UT has always been in the top 5 or 10 as far as developing their facilities to benefit their sports. Now, and then also whether you can make a difference or not. Again, take a look at where Heupel came from with the players he had. Remember, everybody jumped to the portal when he got here, and he was still able to develop those players, which some may have been second team, some may, third team, whatever the case may be. He developed those players. So then he started having success, and then even the successful athletes, Jalen Hyatt, Hendon Hooker, Joe Milton, they started just building. So it's like, okay, if he can change Hendon Hooker, if he can develop him into the quarterback he is, he has to do wonders for me. And then the more and more big names that you come attracted to, because if you are a high school athlete and you worth your salt, you want to go play with the best against the best. Mm-hmm. And right now, not record speaking, we're talking just strictly upon the momentum of the seasons. The past 2 seasons, there's not a hotter college program other than University of Tennessee. That's why you hear all these negative things about, Joe Heupel. I think it was like Josh Heupel, excuse me. I think I read somewhere where Georgia's complaining about the receivers are spread out too wide and all this, and then this Neil money's coming in doing all this other stuff. The reason why they're complaining is because they don't know how to stop it, and they know they can't stop it. So the best thing they can do is complain about it. But see, then when you hear other colleges, the 2-time defending national champion Georgia complaining about Tennessee, what does that tell you? I'm 2-time SEC champion. I beat Alabama twice. What does that say about Tennessee?
Mm-hmm.
You're worried about it. Why? Because you know last year was a fluke, and this year you got to compete against them. And the sad part about it, this year they got to come to Neyland Stadium. So now you want to see where the whole athlete, the student athlete, come in. So when you see that electrifying environment up in Neyland Stadium, especially during the night games,
Mm-hmm.
that's just nothing but electricity. That gets you goosebumps going. You hear Rocket Top from the band. Everybody's hype is going on. It makes you want to play. I mean, I'm 54 years old, and I still sit up here and listen to Rocket Top. I'm like, oh man, I need to get out there and go do something, but I can't do much right now. But it's a whole collective experience, and I think that UT is on the right trajectory, and I think that they just need to build that momentum and keep it going. I think that he has a lot of humble players because he himself is humble. And whenever you get a humble player with a humble coaches, nothing else is going to come out of it except for success.
Do you think so, like you said, Georgia's talking about our wide splits. And, of course, we've all heard about players, NFL teams, when they're drafting our players, how our offense doesn't translate. But do you think that we're going to start to see, maybe not in the NFL yet, but do you think that we're going to start to see other college programs starting to use our offense more and maybe go with maybe the tempo or the wider splits? Because I know there was a quote from Clemson, a Clemson player last year, about how they were, starting to go faster and all this stuff. So do you think we're going to see that more?
Of course. I mean, it's just like anything. Anything in sports is working. You mimic it. You take your own piece of the puzzle. Okay. If you look at Alabama's success under Saban, known as the process, he takes his players through the process. That's his whole thing. Kirby Smart uses the same process. Lane Kiffin uses the same process. So when you look at the offense, now they might mimic it, but they will never be to the point that they'll be good as the originator. Because while they're just learning how to do it, Heupel is getting ready to go into second and third gear on this offense. And then what you're going to do? But then you also got to look at it this way. Let's say Georgia decide or Clemson or anybody decide to go and run Heupel's offense. I guarantee you, if anybody knows how to stop his offense, it's him. So if they want to mimic it, bring it on the stadium. We'll see exactly how you handle that.
Do you see us making a big jump in our defense this year?
I sincerely hope so. I think that, to be frankly honest with you, I think the secondary was kind of suspect a lot of times last year. Either not running through the ball or not running through the ball carrier, or either just not making simple interceptions where they need to be, or being aligned out of place. Playing defensive back is a very disciplined position. And if those players can get that discipline down, then they can depend on their talent. See, a lot of people think that their talent going to take them over and then get them over and above. But if you have that discipline, the fundamental skills, and then you allow that, then you allow your talents become enhanced. So you'll be a lot better. I'm also hoping that they will tackle a lot better. But I think that it's going to be a good scheme. I think the defense is going to be pretty good this year. I think the offense is still going to be the star of the show. And we'll just see what happens from there.
Yeah. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but who do you feel like could be a breakout player for Tennessee this year? And it could be somebody that we expect or maybe somebody that we don't expect. And it could be either side of the ball.
Well, as we were talking previously before the recording, I still have to go with Joe.
Yeah.
And you're like, why? But he has so much talent and so much potential and he's hungry to show that potential. So the accolades or the great comments he's receiving now, that's only going to further enhance as the season go on. Because, like I said, based upon me meeting with him and based upon some of the things I've heard him say to the media, that young man is prepared to do great things. And he has to do great things in order for that offense to function.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to worry about Nico coming behind him, even though I'm pretty sure Nico will probably play at some point in time in the season. But this is Joe Milton's team, and the success of University of Tennessee this year will be based upon boot fall on his shoulders. And I know them shoulders are big enough to handle.
Mm-hmm. They're definitely big shoulders. So,
Mhm.
so, so we talked and you said you didn't really want to give a number prediction for the season, but so I'll phrase it differently. And you may have just answered this, but what do you think needs to happen for us to have as successful of a season as last year? Does it all fall on Joe, or does it mainly fall on the defense, or what do you think?
It's going to be, as it is with football, it's a complete team effort. You can't depend upon the offense nor the defense to do to carry you throughout the season. They have to work together. There would be times when the defense shows up and the offense is a little stagnant. Those things are going to happen. But the success of their season is going to be built around them beating the teams that they're supposed to beat.
Mm-hmm.
And if they beat the team, and I don't know the schedule by heart, but if they beat the team they're supposed to beat, and then the other two games in which they're iffy about, which is the Alabama and the Georgia, they have to figure out a way to win. One of those or both of those. Okay. So if they win both, yes, they're going to have a great season. If they don't win one or the other, they still going to have a great season. But the success is going to be dependent upon beating the teams that you're supposed to beat. The Kentuckys, the South Carolinas, the whoever else we're going to play this year. Vanderbilt, you have to beat Vanderbilt. You can't lose to Vanderbilt. And then that creates momentum, because the whole thing about it, if you lose a game that you're supposed to win, first thing that you're going to do, you're going to start looking down upon yourself, and then you're going to start listening to our wonderful fan base bash you to the next game, and all those things start to play with your psyche. So this is what I like to tell people when you talk about predicting the season. Okay, they do look at the season. They say, okay, these games we should win. These games are tossed in the air. These games we might not be able to get it. But I think Tennessee is at a program where they at this point that the Alabama and the Georgia game is a toss up at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
So if they do what they're supposed to do, they'll go ahead. I'm not going to say they're going to run the table. I'm not saying they're going to win the SEC, but I know they will be extremely competitive in the SEC East, if not win it, based upon how they beat Georgia. Mm-hmm. And then as far as the whole SEC championship, it's just going to depend, because as you know, the SEC, you really can't predict what's going to happen year to year. Not anymore. When Bama had its hog town on SEC, yeah, you give the West to Bama. Now I don't think Bama's even predicted to win the S. I think LSU and even possibly but even talking about Texas is going to beat Alabama this year. So they're not as rock solid from the people's eyes. And same thing with Georgia. Georgia lost a lot of talent last year. Yes, they have a lot of talent to reload, but you lost your major. You lost Stetson Bennett, mm-hmm. and then you lost that offensive, defensive lineman, which pretty much ran the whole team. So if Tennessee do what they need to do, they play competitive against Alabama, play competitive against them, I don't see anybody else on the schedule that will stop them. Yeah, so you take that for what it's worth. It can either go from a 4-6 season or 11-0, or be 8-3. It just all depends on the dynamics of how the season plays off, provided everyone stays healthy. Mm-hmm. That's a major issue, because what would have happened last year had Hendon not got hurt during the game? Will we have lost to South Carolina? We don't know. But those are some of those wrinkles that life or football throws into the game, and you just have to be able to adjust with that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think you gave me a number without wanting to give me a number. Well, Floyd, thank you so much. I've appreciated this time and talking to you and getting your perspective, especially on the team. So, and I appreciate you so much. Are you going to make it to any games this year?
I'm going to try. I will be there. I'll be there at least one or two games. I know I'm coming for homecoming, and I'm not sure which game I'm going to come up to, because my son lives in Oak Ridge, and my grandson. So I know I'm going to come up here, take my grandson to the game, and then we'll just leave and come back, and I do a little tailgating with some of the former players and stuff like that. So I would definitely be there this year, because I don't want to miss out. I mean, I was so mad I missed out on so many opportunities last year to go up there that I didn't get to see the stadium. I didn't get to see the atmosphere, to get that feeling and whatever. And I just, sometimes you just really miss it.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, let's catch up some during the season and talk, and we'll see if your prediction's right. The prediction that you didn't give, but you kind of gave. It's been really nice talking to you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time out to even talk to a VFL like myself. And like I told you before, we are part of Tennessee, is a we are, and a lot of time we get forgotten about, and it's always good when people can bring us back, not so much to the spotlight, but just help us remember, because nobody want to be forgotten. Help us, live that extra generation. I'm surprised that it's been 32 years since Notre Dame game, and people are still talking about it. So
Yeah.
that's a legacy, and a legacy which I'm proud of.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll get together some during the season and we'll do another call like this. And especially if we get some of those big wins that we're all hoping to get. So we'll
You
talk.
notice one thing I didn't talk. You notice one team I did talk about, like in that Alabama Georgia realm, the University of Florida.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
That is no longer, in my opinion, based upon what I've seen from both universities the past 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Florida's going here, Tennessee's going here.
I love it.
If Tennessee plays the way they're supposed to play, they'll blow the Gators out.
Yeah. So many people talk about Kentucky now, and I'm like, who? I mean, I'm almost 40. I'll be 42 next week after next. And I mean, I can count on one hand the number of times we've lost to Kentucky. And people on social media are talking about Kentucky, and I'm like, I always forget they have a football team.
Kentucky is worse than Vanderbilt. We never. There's two games that we knew we were never going to lose, at least under Coach May. One was to Kentucky, and definitely to Vanderbilt. Mm-hmm. Okay, and it's nothing taken away from their program. It's just that's what has been part of history. We've always been Vanderbilt's big brother. We'll always be there. Kentucky, I don't care how good you get. They did beat us a couple years ago, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. But then when you look at even when they were at their best and we were at their worst, we still were better than them. So how could you sit up and say that you can compete against this team that really technically only lost Hooker and Hyatt, but then they replenish? So how are you going to stop them? Yeah.
No, they're not. So
don't worry about Kentucky. Kentucky, you know what? They're not even a basketball school anymore. They can't even beat off all. So it just let Kentucky do what they want to do and just tell them to shut up. They don't even matter. Get to a good bowl game. Yeah. Then come talk to us.
Yeah. Well, Floyd, is there anything else you want to add? You want to what's the name of your podcast?
It's called actually Flow with Floyd, FLOW with Floyd, and it's available on Apple as well as Spotify podcasts. I did drop 2 episodes, one which was about their personal branding, and then one was about dream killers. And the one thing about this podcast that I want the readers to understand is that it's a self-help motivational type podcast. Mm-hmm. Most of the information I talk about is what I've learned since the days of at UT. This Game 7 maxims that Tennessee players read each and every game. I develop certain podcasts I want to talk about. For instance, when they say, what's the first? I can't even think of the first one. Okay, the team making the fewest mistakes will win. Mm-hmm. Okay, basically means anytime if you make less mistakes than your teammate or your opponent, then you should win the ball game. I took that phrase and said the individual who pursues their dream will always be successful. So I'm taking that and I'm taking the football adages from there, and then I'm applying it to life. Mm-hmm. If that makes a lot more sense. And then I also do, and then this is the thing, I also design tumblers as well as drinkware. Okay, and so what you have here is that this is my latest creation for a tumbler. And as you can see, it's on the VFL. Tennessee Volunteers, you have 1987. So if customer wanted to order it, they can put what year they became a Vol on there. And we just put it on there because mine says 1987 because that's when I officially became a Vol for life. Mm-hmm. So, and just things of that nature. I'm always trying to be somewhat creative and I always want to reach out to give, to keep in touch with Tennessee fans as much as possible. Even when I'm at work, some fans come in and they might remember the name. I worked at Apple part-time. Mm-hmm. And I think I've shown that Notre Dame game maybe 20 times. fans just coming in, then they realize the name. They say, oh, this, blah, blah, blah. They're wearing something UT. And I'm just like, okay, so we just start talking, then they want to see everything like that. So that's about it, what I do. But I really encourage people to do listen to the podcast. And then as far as if they want to order tumblers or anything like that, I will have them up on the website, and I will send you the link to to my website as well, so they can go ahead and place an order for it there. So.
Yeah, send me that. For anybody out there watching, if you're not a member of the Vol Vault, be sure and join us. You get lots of great interviews like this and all kinds of info. But Floyd, I guess I won't keep you any longer. I appreciate you again so much for your time.
Oh, no problem. It was my pleasure. Nice speaking with you and talking about Tennessee Vols.
All righty. You have a good night.
All right, you too. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.